Chinese stocks are taking a breather after yesterday's rally when the U.S. announced a temporary tariff reprieve with China. And while the president begins his trip to the Middle East, China is hosting its own confab in Beijing. President Xi meeting with senior leaders from about 30 countries across Latin America and the Caribbean. China is LATAM's second biggest trading partner, and Latin America is the biggest destination for Chinese outbound investment outside of Asia, with total trade between the two now exceeding $500 billion. Eunice Yoon is live in Beijing with more. Eunice, what are they hoping comes out of this?
Well, they're hoping to be able to buy a whole lot more from Latin America. While the U.S. and China are engaged in a trade war, President Xi Jinping has been proactively developing relationships to be able to continue to diversify away from the United States. This week, he was rolling out the red carpet for the Brazilian president, Lula da Silva. Da Silva has been here for 4 days, and the two signed several agreements, essentially allowing China to invest more there in order to buy more products from Brazil. So these deals allowed China to invest in mining, export infrastructure, ports. They're going to cooperate in AI, including around ports. And they also agreed to a 5-year, $157 billion currency swap agreement to facilitate some of that trade. Chinese private companies also committed money, $4.5 billion. This would help them to expand capacity in car factories, chip factories. They pledged purchases in biofuel, agricultural products such as coffee and fruit. And then President Xi, on the geopolitical front, he was headlining that event with the Caribbean nations as well as the Latin American nations, and said that they needed to all stand united in this trade war. And Kelly, he offered a bunch of goodies there, too, saying food and agricultural purchases would be shored up. He committed to a $10 billion credit line. Of course, this is in yuan, in order to make sure that they're doing the business with China, and also a visa-free policy for 5 nations. This is just going to be the first batch, they said, and it would just continue to open up that trade between the two sides.
Right. And of course, it's kind of a poke at the U.S., which, is looking at these deals and saying, OK, China continues to make inroads kind of in our backyard or in our neighborhood, so to speak. And even while some have been unhappy maybe with how that relationship with China has gone over the years, it sounds like they're still very interested in taking this offer.
Oh, yeah, I'm absolutely interested in taking that offer. The Brazilian president in particular, Brazil is now the biggest supplier of corn as well as soybeans to China. And they also got some approvals to be able to start exporting sorghum to China as well. So they definitely want to take advantage of the situation of these trade tensions. What I think, though, also Kelly, was interesting is that Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, has been talking up the 2020 trade deal, saying that the Trump administration wants to go back to that. And if you remember, at that time, China pledged to buy about $200 billion more of U.S. goods, agricultural purchases, over 2 years. That didn't really happen in the way that the U.S. had hoped. But it looks as though China might not even want that to happen even more. What was interesting is just over the weekend, state TV had been talking up the idea that China proactively is making efforts to be able to find alternatives to the United States. And they even made a comparison saying that back in 2016, the U.S. was the biggest supplier for soybeans. And just a short 8 years later, they say, it's now Brazil.
I'm so glad you highlighted that. I thought exactly that these were the products that the first trade deal was supposed to center around. Here are the Chinese striking those deals with Brazil instead, and they've supplanted us in many ways, making the idea of a second deal all that much more difficult. Eunice, thanks. We really appreciate it. Eunice Yoon staying up for us in Beijing tonight.